Ή των Αποστόλων πρωτόθρονη και της οικουμένης διδάσκαλη, το δεσπότη των όλων πρεσβεύσατε, ειρήνην, τη οικουμένη δωρήσαστε και τες ψυχές ημών το μέγα
Once again, we want to remind everyone that our grievance is not with any of our Catholic neighbors, people, once again, that know very, very little about these matters, because the Church hides it. The Catholic Church, quote unquote, hides this information from them. It's amazing how during the false union of Ferrara and Florence, 1438, in the beginning of the Synod, the Pope and 20 metropolitans, Mark of Ephesus, St. Mark, when St. Mark was addressing the Pope, the Catholic monks were in disbelief. We didn't know this. We didn't know that. We were not taught this. The Greeks are right. The Orthodox are right. And after that, the Pope said, no, these meetings are no longer going to be public. So the question is, do we really have such substantial differences? Or is it just political? Is it ego here? You know, we are Constantinople and Byzantium, and they are the West, we are the East. Are there any profound, substantial, biblical differences that keep us from bridging this gap that has been unbridged for the last close to 1,000 years, from 1054? Some of our lukewarm Orthodox, who basically believe that Christianity is all about sympathy and understanding. Their feeling of Christianity reminds us of the, the New Age song, "The Day of Aquarius." Sympathy and understanding. If you ever heard that song, this New Age is coming, and we're all going to fall in love. And when we look at Christianity like this, without any kind of depth, then it is very, very normal to just want to have peace and sympathy and forget our doctrines, because doctrines and beliefs, they divide. But unfortunately, that's not what Christianity is all about. Christ says, I did not come to bring peace in this world, but sword. Meaning that I'm not here to divide you. You will be divided because you will not accept my teachings. My teachings will go against your passionate nature. The heavenly teachings will go against your wishes to live very, very well here on earth. And this is why we have, this division. So we do have a great deal of substantial differences. The first and most substantial difference that we have, and we'll never compromise on this, and the most huge scandal, the rock of scandal, Petra του σκανδάλου, is the papal primacy, το πρωτίον, the papal primacy. Now, what is this primacy? In the church, we had primacy of honor. And we also have primacy of authority. These are two different primacies. Primacy of honor was given initially to the Bishop of Rome. We had the Patriarch of Rome, Constantinople, Jerusalem, Antioch, and Alexandria, the five historical patriarchates. And because initially Rome was the center of the Roman Empire, the Bishop of Rome, while in a synod, in a meeting, somebody was given a first seat, and it was Rome. Second place was Constantinople. Third place, Antioch, Alexandria, and last, Jerusalem. Again, these are simply honorary positions. Just like, let's say, Stanley, in your firm, you may have 5, 6, 7 attorneys. You have a meeting. The one who may be the oldest and the one who probably has been may sit, out of politeness, you will offer your seat to the older person, to the one who somehow has, accomplished some great things. But while voting, everybody issues one vote. One vote. The same thing in the Synod of Greece. We have Archbishop Christodoulos. He may have the synod of 20, 30, 50, 70 bishops. When they're voting, even though he's the first of Greece, first among equals, his vote counts 1 and not 5 or 10, and does not outdo the vote of all the other bishops. So we have primacy of honor. It's an honorary title. Just like we have archbishops, we have metropolitans, we have patriarchs. These are all bishops. And in a synod, they can only cast one vote, and that's it. However, the popes of Rome were not satisfied with this honorary position. Very early on, they began to demand a position of authority. We have Saint Basil the Great, even in the 4th century. He's writing to Athanasius, and he's writing about the raised eyebrow of the Latin patriarchs. He talks about this attitude of the Latins and their intentions to subdue the church. This tendency began very early on. Epirmeni of Phris, his father tells us. So the popes slowly manipulated the scriptures to raise themselves above all bishops, above all saints, above all the synods, and above the church. In the person of Pope, today, in the Latin theology, in the person of Pope, the entire church stands. God forbid, if the Vatican would be swallowed by the earth tomorrow, we would have no church, according to the theology of the papacy. And not all the Catholic people who laugh at these things. When you tell them about papal primacy, they laugh. Especially infallibility. They don't believe this. But Vatican holds on to this, and you will see why. In 1438, this is history. I'm not telling you anything that's not historical. In 1438, the popes became so audacious, Stanley, that they demanded that all the other bishops and patriarchs and emperors kiss their foot. That was a sign of submission to the Pope. So at 1438, John Paleologos, fearing the Turks or the Muslims and desperately wanting help from the Vatican or from the Pope, from the Latins, he convinced and pushed the church, dragged the church all the way to Florence. And Joseph, the patriarch, was very optimistic. He said, we're going to go there and we'll show them our theology and we will not give an inch. And you will see how the Pope and the Latins will receive us. They will embrace us, just like brothers. He convinced all the other bishops to go. And Mark of Ephesus, who saved our church at that time. Everybody else didn't make it. They all signed, with the exception of several people, several Russians, and also a few of the bishops. Most of them did sign. Okay. The false union. After they got there, the Pope Eugenius, sent a representative, asking John Palaiologos to go and kiss his foot. And for 3 days, the emperor denied. He would not go. And then he sent a representative to Patriarch Joseph to go and do this symbolic gesture. And Joseph says, where did you see in the gospel Christ teaching us that we should be kissing people's feet? Where did you see this? I am your brother, and I came as your brother, and I'm not doing no such thing. And I'm getting on the boat, and I'm going back. Was ready to take off, and finally the Pope said, okay. Sorry, it's just a custom. We don't have to do this. He was forcing even emperors, even the great Barbarossa, tough leaders. That's how much power they had, to go and bow down and kiss their feet. And they feel that this is their divine right. And how do they come to this? How do they come to this? Let's see what is behind this theory, because it's only a theory. And we'll see if it's really true, a truth or a lie. They teach that the Pope is the leader of all the Christian world, not just the Papists, but also the Orthodox and the Protestant, according to this divine right. Christ gave absolute authority to Peter to be the primate of all the apostles, and Peter subsequently went to Rome, preached and established the Church of Rome, where he became the first bishop of Rome. And while dying, he transferred his absolute authority to the popes. So the popes, according to this theory, they are pontiffs. They are the high priests of all Christendom. Now, is this theory true? Is it a fact? Does it agree with the scriptures? Or is it simply an evil teaching of demonic dimensions? How do they arrive to this? They use the verse of Matthew 16:18, and even the little children in Rome and Vatican, they know this by heart. You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Okay, so here the Pope says, you see, this is it. Christ says, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and I will give you the authority to loosen and bind. And whatever you loose on earth, it's loosed in heaven. Whatever you bind on earth is bound in heaven. So this is how they get this right. But studying the scriptures carefully, did Christ say, you are Peter, and on you I'm building my church? No. Christ says, after Peter made this great confession, who do people say that I am? Christ asked. Some people thought that he was Elijah. Some thought that, he was one of the prophets. And Peter, illumined by the Holy Spirit, he says, you are the Christ, the Son of God, the Son of the living God. An illumination of the Holy Spirit. And Christ says, and you are Petros. You are Peter. You are the rock. Petros in Greek means rock. And on this rock I will build my church. Meaning, on your faith, on this kind of confession, on this confession of faith, on faith such as this, I'm going to build my church. But according to the Latins, Peter is the foundation of all the church. But that is so anti-scriptural. Peter is not the foundation of the church, but all the apostles are the stones of the church's foundation. In Ephesians 2, verse 20, St. Paul says to the Ephesians, you are members of God's household, built on the foundation of the apostles, and not Peter. You, the church, you are members of the church, and you are built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ himself as the chief cornerstone. So who built the church? Christ. The primary cornerstone, the foundation of the church is Christ, and not Peter alone. Christ is the primary founder of the church. The secondary founders of the church are all the 12 apostles. In Revelation 21:14, when we have the New Jerusalem, the New Jerusalem is being described by St. John, he says, and the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So if Peter was the only foundation of the church, and of course that's how the Pope becomes the only foundation of the church, then the name of, in all these rocks, in all these foundations, should be Peter and not all the 12 apostles. And the authority of loosening and binding Christ gave to all the apostles, because after the resurrection, he told all the apostles, receive the Holy Spirit. Whatever you, all of you, bind on earth is bound on heaven. And this is true for all the apostles and not just Peter. So we have no super apostles. Let's see. We have no super apostles. The popes also use another verse to support these claims, these theories. And they use the verse in Luke 22:32 when Christ is ready to go on the cross, and he tells Peter, tonight Satan wanted to sift you like wheat, but I prayed for you. I prayed for you, and you will not lose your faith. You will deny me, but you'll come back. And then Christ makes this prophecy, of course, and he says, after you return, then styrixon, support and strengthen your brothers. And the Pope say, you see, Christ told Peter to strengthen his brothers. So Peter is in charge. No, obviously here Peter is falling. He's falling. He says, after you come back, after I saved you, because I prayed for you, after you come back, because the faith of some of the apostles will be shaken too, help them out ethically, not subdue them, not make him your understudies. They're your brothers. They're your brothers. So all the bishops are brothers, and all the apostles were brothers. We do not have a super apostle, as the entire papacy is standing on. This is the doctrine that's brought about most of the other false doctrines that they have to use to bolster this one. They need this one desperately, and you'll see why. But again, in the Christian history, we can study and see, I mean, this is historical. They claim that Peter was the first bishop of Rome. Is this correct? Is it true? And what's Paul doing sending letters to the Romans? When St. Paul says in one of the epistles, I do not want to build on another man's foundation. So why would he be sending letters to another man's church, basically, and not, if that would be the jurisdiction of Peter? The apostles all had their places. So we know historically that the Church of Rome was not established by Paul or Peter. Do you want to know how the Church of Rome was established? Not by a bishop. by Christians, by lay people, by merchants. By merchants. Christians who were lay people, but their first and foremost purpose in life was the gospel of Christ. But another thing is that the apostles were never bishops. We do not have any of the apostles holding the position of a bishop. A bishop is a lower position than that of the apostle. The apostolic authority is higher than that of the bishop. So this thing that Peter was the first bishop of Rome, it does not stand anywhere. Peter taught in Jerusalem. He taught in Syria. He taught in Antioch. Then why don't these patriarchs raise themselves up and say that we are also successors of Peter? The only one who made the statement is the Bishop of Rome, that he is the successor of Peter. And because Peter was the president and the head of all the apostles, then when Peter was dying, then he transferred this authority, this governing and absolute authority, to the Pope of Rome only. Again, an attempt to control the church and the other bishops. If Peter was the presiding apostle, the leader and pontiff of the church and all the apostles, then what would be his position in the Apostolic Synod that took place at 49 AD? In the Acts of the Apostles, we have the church getting together. We have the First Apostolic Synod, 49 AD. A problem came with the circumcision of the Gentiles. And they questioned Paul, why are you baptizing and why are you bringing in Gentiles to become Christians and you're not even circumcising them? And there, Paul had a disagreement with Peter. And who did the synod agree with, Peter or Paul? They agreed with Paul. So much about the infallibility. But who was the president of the synod? It should have been Peter. Peter should have said, I am the leader of the apostles, therefore whatever I say goes. This is how the synods of the Catholic Church, or the Latin Church rather, takes place today. The word of the Pope is law. That's it. We don't see this in the apostolic era. We see that Apostle Peter is not the head of the church, is not the president of the synod, but the first bishop of Jerusalem is presiding on the synod. James, the brother of God, or the